Drew Barrymore's mother turned her into a monster.
She created a monster, and she didn't know what to do with the monster.
Drew's childhood was so bad that the actress ended up in rehab at just 12. She became legally emancipated 2 years later, but it didn't stop her life from spiraling downhill. So what made Drew get back on her feet? And how did her horrible upbringing affect the way she raises her own children? Barrymore comes from a long line of Hollywood legends, and her own career started before she could talk, at 11 months old. 6 years later, she landed a part in a blockbuster E.T. directed by her godfather Steven Spielberg. Drew was nominated for several acting awards as an outstanding newcomer.
Thank you for this award!
Despite these amazing accolades, the little girl didn't think she was talented or beautiful.
I never looked in the mirror and thought I was beautiful. I always had the lowest self-esteem of anybody I knew.
Off camera, Drew was living in a nightmare. Her father, John Drew Barrymore, had problems with booze and often became violent. In fact, the actress' earliest memory is of her dad hurting her mother. Drew's mom was also far from perfect. Jade was an aspiring actress whose daughter accused her of being totally unprepared for motherhood. Drew was desperate for love from her parents, only their relationship was filled with issues.
I didn't have a dad. I felt like my mom was abandoning me because she was always off at work.
The young star was unhappy, insecure, and looking for attention. And her mother helped her find it in the worst way possible, by taking her partying. For an 8-year-old that was bullied at school, this seemed like heaven. Jade treated Drew as her friend because she failed at being a parent.
You know, I didn't want to go off and play Barbies. I wanted to go out to a club and dance.
Her mom thought it was cute to see Drew playing and being an adult. And so did the rest of the world. It became part of her punchline when she was the youngest person to ever host SNL at just 8.
I'm a Barrymore. Get me a drink and make it a double.
Shockingly, there was more truth to this than many people realized, because Drew already had a taste for alcohol. The first time she got drunk, she was 8 years old. Even worse, it was with her mother. By the time she was 9 and her parents divorced, Drew was pouring liquor over her ice cream and had started smoking too. I don't think I understood what was good or pleasurable or bad. I was probably chasing joy, but I don't think it was the real joy. I was just too young to know. Within 3 years, Barrymore wasn't just drinking and partying with adults. She tried some pretty hot substances too. My mind told me, well, if smoking is cute, it'll also be cute to get the heavier stuff. What I did kept getting worse and worse, and I didn't care what anybody else thought. Not even a 6-month stay in rehab as a 12-year-old cured Drew from her bad habits. With Barrymore's dad out of the picture, her mom was raising the rebellious preteen alone, and she could no longer cope. When Drew tried to take her own life, her mother had to act. As a last resort, Jade booked Drew into a mental institution for an 18-month stay. During this time, Drew's mom only visited occasionally.
She created a monster, and she didn't know what to do with the monster.
Thankfully, someone did know what to do about Drew. The teen attended a lot of therapy and got the attention she'd so desperately craved her whole life.
It was so upsetting at first, but over the course of that year and a half, I left there like the most humble person you could ever imagine.
Her program therapists also recommended that Drew get away from her mom through emancipation, which is how Drew became legally free at 14. However, this came with price. While she was making headlines for her bad behavior, Hollywood fell out of love with the actress. Barrymore gained her freedom, yet lost her job. They just wrote me off as damaged goods, and I sadly understood that. Instead, the former child star started working as a waitress and cleaner. All the while, Drew was auditioning wherever she could. She was determined to prove to Tinseltown that she was better. Drew was welcomed back to Hollywood after 3 long years, but she was struggling. Drew hadn't spoken to her dad for years and was emancipated from her mom. She was lost and lonely and looked for love in all the wrong places. When Drew made her screen return at 17, she'd already been engaged twice and appeared in a nude photo shoot. A year later, she made it down the aisle after a 3rd engagement, but her marriage to a barman only lasted 19 days. Her fans started to worry that the actress was back to boozing and using. especially after she did a second nude photo shoot. Her godfather, Steven Spielberg, was appalled. When he saw the magazine, the director gave Drew a quilt with a note that read, "Cover yourself up." At the same time, Barrymore's relationships were making headlines. In 2000, after a year of dating, she walked down the aisle again with actor Tom Green. This time, the marriage lasted 9 months. It took an awkward interview for Drew to realize she was acting out. During a talk with David Letterman when she was 25, Barrymore decided to dance on his desk and flash the presenter. Her spontaneous display felt good at the time, but when Drew saw the interview, she was ashamed of herself. "I started my journey into no sex scenes in movies, modesty clauses in my contracts, and a total lack of nudity in any public forum from there on out." It was a good decision, because despite the dramas in her private life, Drew's career was taking off. She's become a regular on the rom-com scene and fans loved it. Eventually, Drew regained her image as a Hollywood royalty when Charlie's Angels came out and totally dominated the box offices. And her success didn't stop at her career. Drew finally got the thing she'd been looking for all this time: family. In 2012, Drew married art consultant Will Kopelman and welcomed her first child, a daughter called Olive. 2 years later, the family grew when daughter Frankie was born. For the first time, Barrymore had a normal home life.
The ultimate promise I wanted to make was to have this amazing family, and I found them.
And she planned it that way. The actress admitted that she would never repeat the mistakes her parents made. Instead, Drew wanted to be a traditional kind of mom who would give her kids stability and put them first. Barrymore chose not to be like her own mother.
I'm not your friend. I'll never be your friend. I'm your mother.
Tragically, her happy family broke up in 2016. The actress was devastated. Drew felt like a failure and a bad parent. She was convinced she was going to damage her girls the way her mom damaged her. It was a second major turning point for Drew. She wanted her girls to grow up with happily married parents, and that wasn't happening.
The one relationship that I entered that I swore was going to work was the one with my kid's father, Will.
I think that's why I took it so hard.
Drew was so distraught that she visited a therapy facility after the split to seek help. She knew she had to be strong for her daughters, because they were her reason for living.
They saved my life.
Thankfully, both the former parents are dedicated to co-parenting their kids without any drama. Even though her dream family doesn't look like Drew planned, there was a major upside to her marriage with Will. Having children helped the actress reconnect with her own mom. I felt so guilty denying my mom access to me. It felt like I was cutting off the source of life. Definitely the worst pain I've ever known. And I just thought, I have to let this go. This has also given Jade a second chance, this time to be a granny. And before that, Barrymore managed to forgive her father too. The actress even spent time with him before he lost his battle to cancer, which helped Drew realize there was one last thing she needed to let go.
I have not had a drink of alcohol in 2.5 years.
And today, she's nearly 4 years sober. Now Drew is happier than ever. Her family might not look like she planned, but for her, it's perfect. This woman's biggest achievement is being a mom to her daughters. Which just goes to show, kids don't need perfect parents. They just need you to be there for them.